Hello, and welcome to Dream Cinema. I am your host, JD Rudometkin. For the past 5 years, the Step Jayne album Silver Bullet Suicide has been released one track at a time with an accompanying music video. This year, in Dream Cinema, I will be exploring each track and video with a co-host. This month, I am in conversation with Activation and Ascension guide Katherine Christine Whaler. Katherine trained in women's studies and theater at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and currently works with clients all over the world, helping them to discover their true mission in life. Katherine also performs in theater on occasion as time permits. If you have not yet viewed the Step Jayne music video for the song All the Women in Every Room, we encourage you to do so prior to listening to our conversation. Thank you. We're pleased you joined us. Katherine Whaler, welcome to Dream Cinema.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And
Thank you.
I've been observing you from afar via social media, seeing what you do and what you're about a little bit. This is the first time we've chatted live in cyberspace, so it's nice to see you here.
Yeah, it's nice to actually get to connect with you after connecting over social. Over social.
Yeah, and you know what I thought we'd start with is a poem, if that's okay with you. Is it okay if I start with a poem here?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
So this is called Wild Geese.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, there's a connection here. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
Yeah, beautiful.
So I noticed that you have that on your website.
Not on my website, but on my social. Yeah, I just shared it.
Social. Yeah. So why is that poem up there? Before we begin with all the women in every room, I thought we would just because to me it sort of ties in a way. But
I see how you say that. Yeah. Well, that's been my favorite poem. That and Of Mere Being by Wallace Stevens. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That one is about expansion. And I think the two complement each other really well, because Of Mere Being is all about like expanding limitations and going past what we think is possible. And it's like about sort of, shifting energy and allowing energy to expand and grow. And then Wild Geese is sort of the more feminine aspect of that, of just allowing yourself to be and allowing yourself to just be present and have grace with where you are, rather than trying to push forward or feel like you have to prove yourself in order to be worthy of being here.
Those two things are in a bit of a tug of war from time to time, aren't they? The two ideas.
It's the masculine and the feminine element, absolutely. And in my work, I love to work with the balance of both, which is why I'm really interested to hear about your video, because there were so many symbols of the divine feminine in it. So interesting to come from a divine masculine. Like, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. But yeah, I think that the balance of both is where we find harmony. And I think in our world today, we have shirked the divine feminine, and without the divine feminine, you can't have the divine masculine. You have just the dark masculine. So we've been in just this paradigm basically since the age of Aries, of just this really dark masculine energy. And without that balance, it can get bad.
We see that from the 20th century alone, not to mention a lot of other bloody battles from other centuries, but it was a rough go, and seemed to be dominated by a lot of male dictators.
Male dictators, male conquests, just war in general. It's really fascinating. I was actually watching a video on it last night because they have found ruins in Egypt to suggest that there were extremely peaceful, very feminine civilizations before sort of the pharaohs that we know today in our history books. And it has been purposefully hidden and purposefully literally buried in the sand out there by the victors, because they didn't want people thinking that they had access to enlightenment or access to consciousness, which of course, like I said, you have to have both divine masculine and divine feminine to fully integrate and to fully achieve. And so it just puts us so out of whack and so out of balance when we don't have both, right? And society has been built around that for the last few thousands of years.
Yeah, and I want to say, this is Mary Oliver. That poem that we read was Mary. I don't know if people can see that, but that's Mary Oliver. And this book was given to me by my sister-in-law, and she gives me books from time to time, and I don't read them for a while. I'll just they'll go in the corner, and then all of a sudden it'll be time to pick it up. And so I've read a few from there, and then I saw on your social site the excerpt from that poem. I thought, where have I seen this? Where have I? And so then I just rediscovered it again. And Mary has a wonderful way of kind of sinking into that space that you're talking about, what you call the divine feminine. And it seems like it exists in males and females, but sometimes is suppressed in some macho type of training and things like that go on, right?
Yeah, well, that sort of, toxic masculinity that we talk about. I mean, I come from a feminist studies background. That's what I studied in college.
Okay.
So I can talk about it from the sort of more educational standpoint too, but that toxic masculinity that we speak about so often, that is the dark masculine. And like I said, there's not really room for that, right? And without getting into it too much, the dark feminine is sort of more of like our shadow sides and the things that we're afraid of. The dark masculine is when we push all of that away, and then we try to control and exert power from a place of running away from ourselves, right? And just like full on, just like lower ego expression. So yeah, both men and women and trans and non-binary people, we all have divine masculine and divine feminine energies, which, like I said, that's why the divine feminine is rising right now. And we see that predominantly in people who are women or who identify as femme-bodied. And then we're going to start seeing sort of a shift in masculine collective and the male collective, towards a healthier expression of masculinity, because they're integrating right now the feminine aspects of it. And I actually find it interesting because it's actually a lot of like spiritual gurus who are trying to integrate the divine masculine first, and it's sort of falling flat. And a lot of people are now sort of turning away from that and saying, no, I don't think that's quite right. I think we need sort of the balance of both. It can't just be about the light and the sun. It has to be about digging into the midnight garden, digging into that shadow side of self, those more wild, chaotic sides of ourself as well.
Well, that ties right in with all the women in every room, the music,
Yes.
doesn't it? I mean, as far
Absolutely.
as my perception, and maybe we can start off with that by talking about a possible narrative that you see in there. When you watched the video, did you see a through line, a narrative, a story?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it really did seem like that breaking free of bondage, releasing toxicity. It actually reminded me so much of the work that I did in college as
really?
also an acting major. Yeah. I did a voice project and a one-person show that was very, very similar, where it was kind of like, being untied and that sort of thing. And just, I loved at the end too, when she had the sort of Viking funeral and the burning. So, and I thought it was interesting too, that it was like these older women coming to the younger ones to help with that liberation and to help with that transformation. So yeah, I definitely saw those themes very strongly.
Yeah, so it sounds like you did see what I always ask people after I create. I usually take it to a few friends that I've known through the years, and I trust, and I say, do you see the story here? Because a lot of the time, the way I feel it when I'm creating it is more of an ambient type of sensation. And so sometimes I'm not sure if the story got through as clear as it did. So that's why I asked you, what did you see a character going through a series of events to reach an end point? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it was a big, transformation, and I felt viscerally affected by it, watching it and thinking of my own journey. And I thought you got that across really well.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So let's dive in then. This Dream Cinema is a bit of an odd duck because it's co-hosted. So in other words, usually when you have somebody on a show, you ask them a bunch of questions, but I also, and which we'll be doing that as we go along, but also you have some questions prepared for me about your curiosities about the video or things that you were wondering about. Is that correct?
Yeah, how could I not? I don't know how you can watch and listen to that and think, yes, no questions.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. And that's why you're probably here right now, I guess, because you're a curious person and you watch things in a way that where you probably sink in a little more than some audience members, which is fine too. Everybody enters their own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love to know what your inspirations were for that. And something I'm really fascinated by, because I was listening to the lyrics and it didn't necessarily feel connected, but maybe that was just because I wasn't hearing the lyrics correctly or something. And I only unfortunately got the chance to watch it once. I wish I'd gotten to watch it a few times before we got on. I'm interested to know sort of what your inspirations were for both the song and the video.
Yeah. Well, the song at that time and right prior to that, I was listening to Nick Cave, and his album is called that I was listening to is called "Push the Sky Away," and it became like a meditation for me, and I listened to it more than probably any other album I've listened to, and Higgs Boson Blues is, I think, the last track on the album, and it's just sort of this ambient pilgrimage through a weird world that he creates. And so it just sort of floats into that space. And so when I started writing this with the piano and the lyrics, it just sort of started occurring as moments and feelings, and not so much about a linear specific thing, more than just just an emotion that was coming through, and images and ideas and quandaries about the very nature of existence. Right now, the snow is coming down right outside this window. It's just amazing. I wish you could see it. It's just coming down, and there's a mountain right in front of me.
That's so cool.
And half the time in life, I just trip out on the fact that we're even here. Mm-hmm. The fact that we're even in these bodies existing. And so one of the lines is, who writes the music that makes the young girls dance? Who put the local star into the orbit here by chance? I don't know. Maybe you have insights onto how that all goes down, but most of the time, I'm just kind of like in a state of awe and wonder the fact that we're even here.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, for those listening who don't know me, I am an original Akashic record keeper. I do work with the 23rd dimension, and I was just born this way. This is just who I've been in this life and many, many, many other lives. Yeah, I mean, I think like it kind of actually goes back to what we were talking about before with, sort of the spiritual or the conscious take on the Big Bang, is it was that in the beginning there was darkness. And I was thinking about it last night too, that even in the biblical text, there's darkness. And then the first thing that God makes in that first day is light. And so again, we've kept the feminine out of the narrative for so long to exert power and control over the masses and not allow them to access their full consciousness. That's why women have been so persecuted. And specifically women with lineages connected to magic and connected to manifestation and consciousness and everything, like witches and wise women. And so I think like it actually goes back to that, where in the beginning it was the void and it was just dark space, right? And it was nothingness and everything and possibility all at the same time. And so it is sort of like the womb in that way, where it's this space where everything and nothing can happen, right?
The paradox.
The paradox, exactly. Yeah. And that's why, again, people who identify as a woman or identify as femme-bodied are so threatening, because it is the energy of everything and nothing, which people who are more masculine energied don't really understand as well this life, right? And they're not supposed to. We all take our turns with that. But I think like basically what I'm getting at is in the beginning, it was nothing. In the beginning, it was darkness and it was possibility. And then as the mystery school teachings go, the masculine energy kind of came in and was like curious about the feminine and kind of was like exploring it and seeing what it was all about. And then it was their meeting together that caused the Big Bang and that birthed everything. And again, as most traditions go, the Milky Way is sort of the mother, right, of the universe, birthing all these stars and stuff. So that's one way to look at it. One perspective. Well,
it is it's interesting. When you were talking, I was remembering this book by a German author. It's called The Flounder, and I can't remember the author's name right now, but he was suggesting in that book that as a flounder, he was a male flounder, and the women at that time in that epic of history had the power, had the say, had the dominance. And we do know that in the past there were certain societies that were operating from more of a feminine standpoint, where the women were the leaders and things like that. And it's
in a way they still are in indigenous communities. It's so interesting that we're talking about this, because I was completely diving into this last night. And so interesting how that synchronicity works.
Yes, right.
But I was listening to a testimony of a woman who had written a book about her divine feminine and masculine integrations. And she was saying that she was talking to a shaman in an indigenous community. And he was saying that, the men know their role, the women know their roles. And then he said, except the women have extra power because they can tell the men to stop. And so they let the men know when it's gone too far. And he said, where are the women in your society? telling the men to stop, or telling the masculine energy to stop. Right? Like, we're taking too much from the earth. We're pushing too hard. Like, where is that energy?
Well, I feel that so much more than anything. And when people go into talking about politics, I think my number one thing on my agenda is the world we live in, and what we are doing to our home here, and what we are doing to destroy it or preserve it. And some people say that we're just in this natural epoch that will eventually come to an end, and there will be another cycle will begin. And so part of me goes into that phase of, well, it's just part of this natural course. Why do I fight it? And then part of me comes in and says, yes, I'm glad that they stopped the pipeline. I'm glad that they are climbing in trees and not letting people cut them, like Butterfly. The woman who climbed into the tree and like about 20 years ago, I can't remember, something Butterfly, but I don't know. How do you approach activism in terms of, thinking about cosmic epochs and stages versus being active in our present time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I think that that's sort of the question on everyone's mind. And interesting that we're doing this. Yesterday was the Leo full moon, and that was sort of the divine expression of that moon. Like, there was a lot of, other little stuff that moon translated to, but from the divine expression standpoint, it was all about, how do you show up as a light leader? And how do you become a leader within your own community? And I think that's the thing, is it does start with that personal revolution and that personal, activism, if you will, in your own life, so that you even have the capacity and the space to be able to help others, or to be able to contribute to a cause. And I think we do underestimate just how far our personal contributions can go. And I think if every single person was doing their part, that would make a difference in and of itself, but also that would shift the cultural landscape, so that these bigger companies or whatever that are doing the most damage would have to be held more accountable and would have to shift as well. I think largely it's a generational thing too. And without getting into it too much, I think that future generations are just more conscious than the generations that we have currently. Like, my generation of the Pluto and Scorpio cohort, and then Pluto in Sag, and then Pluto in Aquarius, are really like conscientious, specifically about activism and making sure, Pluto in Libra too, the sort of like indigo children, right? Are really invested in building a world that is sustainable, and building a world where people have equity and have access in equal ways. And so I do think that it's shifting. I don't think that we're like headed for catastrophe. I've been shown in my own visions, and also I have heard from other people who are exploring future life progressions, that we have about 600 years to kind of align with a higher timeline. And I think that happens with both personal work, but then also community work. And I think people become daunted by sort of activism, but activism can really just be you showing up in your own field and your own community with your conscious gifts, with your will and your desire to make the world a better place, and just implementing those policies in your own field, or contributing that in your own field. And then I think if we all do that, it's like lights on a light board. We all light each other up, and it just keeps expanding and keeps growing.
Yeah, fantastic. And it makes sense. And it makes sense to me in terms of a lot of the finger pointing that was going on in the last 4 years, especially.
Yeah.
A lot of people pointing fingers and being very acerbic and biting, and I would see some of these posts, and I still do, and I feel like if we relate this to All the Women in Every Room music video, to me it's about kind of going there, being willing to go there, in yourself to look at what we are doing ourselves, what we need to kind of spend some time taking a look at in the mirror and observing in ourselves. And maybe there are some really dark things in us that we've pushed aside because for whatever reason, and we've decided to maybe point the finger at this person or that person in that political party or whatever, instead of taking a time to say, yes, my most important political activity at the very basic grassroots level could be just a look at who I am and where I'm coming from.
I think that's definitely where the work starts. And I think that for most people, that's the phase that they're in, where they do have to do that inner work first and focus on themselves first before they even have space to help others, or before they even have space to contribute to a cause. And so I do think it's that dual mission, because we never stop doing that in ourselves, because we have been so conditioned by the society that we grew up in, right? Even like the idea of, you know, someone is going to swoop in and save the day, or these political leaders are finally going to do the right thing. I mean, to me, it's like, it's sad. It's sad to watch. On this recent inauguration, I was both elated and also really sad, because so many people were putting so much, either side, right? Both sides were putting so much emphasis on who the leader was. And although I think that that day was a wonderful day in terms of representation in government and everything, and I'm so happy for all like the Black and brown girls who got to see themselves represented, at the same time, I think that there is so much emphasis placed on like who the leader of the country is. And again, we're in this age of Aquarius where we are our own leaders, right? We are our own gurus. So I think it is, and that's what Aquarius is about, is it's the individual revolution for the collective. And like I said, I loved your video because it does start with the divine feminine. Like, not necessarily that it starts with women, although it did. But also I think that it just goes back to like, you know, just going a little bit easier on yourself, having grace with yourself, allowing yourself to go through this transformative process, right? Allowing yourself to look at those deeper, darker things and release that and move on from that. And then just, like I said, that ripple effect of once you do that for yourself, you're so much better able to help others with that and hold space for others to do their own work. And I think even going back to the savior thing, again, we find that it's because we've lost the divine feminine. We've lost the Mary Magdalene in the Jesus and the Yeshua story. And, you know, we're waiting for like this man to come down and save us, when it's like, when you have the both of them in that story, you realize that it's the merging of masculine and feminine energy in yourself, and like the purification, right, of oneself. That's the ascension process. It's not necessarily that it's this one man who ascended and went to heaven, because of course in the mystery school text, so did Mary Magdalene. So it's like, because we've cut out so much like the juicy stuff of that story, and that was done very deliberately by the church. I think that all of us, whether we're Christian or not, or grew up Christian or not, have sort of this buried into our collective consciousness that we're waiting for someone to save us, versus stepping up and doing that for ourselves. And women specifically, and femme energy people specifically, have come to a point where we have realized that. And so I think that I see that even more with women, where they're like, yeah, no one, or folks of color, or any kind of marginalized community, where they're like, no one is coming to save us, so we have to save ourselves, right? And I think that that's where a sort of a divide, especially this year, as we see more Aquarius energy and that collective energy, especially in the United States, because we are an Aquarius moon country. So it's the people are being affected. The people are being asked energetically to rise up. So I think it's interesting, because I saw that so much in your video that it was like this personal responsibility, but then also sort of this connection with these older ancestors or these older spirit guides paving the way and sort of guiding you. And I think that that's like such a rich thing in feminine tradition that now every single person is starting to access or has access to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the Mary Magdalene story, I created a short film about
Oh, really?
10 years ago, and it had direct quotes from Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And when I read that, it kind of harkens back to what I was talking about with Nick Cave and the lyrics for this song. When I read it, it puts me in a place where I'm feeling things and I'm experiencing things more than I'm intellectualizing things. And her manuscript is kind of torn, and there are bits and pieces of it that are, missing.
The 4 pages that are missing are all about ascension.
Yeah.
All about personal ascension.
Interesting. Well, it was such an I don't know if exciting is the right word. It put me in this state of mind where, which some writers do. Carol Maso is a writer that I really like. Her stuff is more like, a lot of times it's erotic, but it's also like it's just sensuous in whatever she's talking about. But she puts me in this place where I started just kind of. I enter what I call the body more than the mind. That's how I sometimes refer to it.
That's the feminine.
Dropping into the body, experiencing what the language of the body. And a lot of what I'm focusing on this year in the ritual part of my 5 doors thing is to drop into the body and learn the language, because it seems like it's subtle. It operates in a way that we have not emphasized in our education system a lot of the time. For instance, we go to these classes, they start now and they end now. And I know we need structure, and it makes sense, and I like to structure my life. But it seems like that element of teaching people how to drop into their body, that's not part of the curriculum really in schools. I mean, there's physical education, and that helps to some degree. I think it's cool what some people are doing, like David Lynch, when he's offering meditation classes to underprivileged kids in the Midwest, and offering it for free, and getting people to possibly enter this other way of being. But there is a lot of resistance to that, isn't there? There's a lot of resistance to that way of being, and it seems like it has to do with, it's not like this clear-cut A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 type of thinking. And maybe that just freaks people out to some degree, and I try to be sensitive to those types of folks, because I come from that tradition. And a lot of people that I love and know and respect and have a lot of wisdom, they come from a place of where the new way of being in the world, the thing that's coming through, is seen as something to fear and something to be afraid of. So how do we bridge the gap between the old world and the new world, if we want to call it that, in a way that doesn't just create another war or another point of division? Is there a way to do that, or does there have to be a burning?
No, what's so beautiful is it's already happening. It's already happening. We're living in a completely different landscape than we were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I mean, we are seeing, like I said, we are seeing this integration. There have been so many women and femme energied folks who have been working and helping the collective in their rising of that energy, and of letting go of the need to succeed, right? Letting go of the need to be right, letting go of having to follow a specific structure, the to-do list of life, right? One of the most important people, I think, personally, in our cultural history recently is Brene Brown. And how she talks about letting go of judgment, right? Letting go of shame. And I think so much of that work is really going to help us connect in with that true essence of ourself, which is that intuitive self, that it's not just the intellect, it's not just the mind, but it's also the heart. And it's the body. And again, going back to the mystery school traditions, that's what the crook and the flail signified, crossing over the heart, was the masculine and feminine energy. And this beautiful bridge of the mind and the heart coming together and creating unity. And I think it's interesting too, because the Heart Math Institute, they're actually doing a lot of research on this right now, but that the heart is actually controlling the mind and not the mind controlling the heart, the way that we have thought in recent history and recent science. And so it's actually the electrical impulses of the heart that's controlling the body and the brain more so than the brain controlling everything. And I'm like, yeah, I knew that. Hello, that's why I incarnated to teach people this.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think just, we're human beings. We're not human doings, right? And I think people, again, it's so interesting to look at, for me as a professional astrologer and looking at it from the astrological level, because these cohorts of these soul waves, they've come through to break that down. Like, it is in our DNA. My year specifically, we're having a huge rising ourselves this year when we have Jupiter in Pisces, because a lot of us have a Pisces stellium. And so, and Pisces Saturn, right? And so, and the Aquarius Saturn people going through their return too. I mean, all of this is about bridging the two, right? Bridging the gap, not being in such a patriarchal dominated society that is so about rigidity and so about structure. And like you said, we need structure, right? We can't just be all and have a functioning society. We need structure too, but we've just gone so far that end that we've lost what actually makes life pleasurable and what actually makes life enjoyable and, dare I say, easy, right? And effortless, because when you trust your intuition and when you trust your body, it's less of like a push and a pull and shame and judgment and everything. You're just listening to what you need and what's coming through organically for you, because we have been built as these beautiful beings, these emotional beings. That is the power of the human, right? It's not just that we are intellectual, but we're emotional. We feel, we are able to sense and touch. And so I think that, like, just coming into the awareness that we were built this way for a reason, instead of trying to shove down our emotions, shove down our feelings, is a huge way of bridging that gap. And even meditation is kind of more on the masculine end of things, because it's connecting to sort of like an out of body, experience.
That's interesting.
And it's shutting off the senses. And so unless you're doing a meditation that's specifically essential, but I think like more of what I would like to see is like ecstatic dance in classrooms, or, on top of the meditation, right? Or asking, like, I remember when I was living in Austin, there was this woman taking her little girl outside, and her little girl goes, Mommy, I think I have to go to the bathroom. And she's like, okay, do you or don't you? And she goes, I don't know. And she goes, okay, ask your body what it needs. And I thought, oh, I want to be that kind of mother. But also I think as adults, we can do that work as well, right? Like that's what, human design, which I also teach, is about just listening to the body, listening to cues in the body. And, we have everything that we need right here. It's really just the deprogramming, all the conditioning. Yes. That's what's going to take the time, because that's embedded in our DNA as well.
Oh my, yeah. It feels like in ancient traditions, we had such an understanding of how to communicate with the land, the trees, with each other, with our body, to live within it in this space that slowly it felt like it got taken away from us through Industrial Revolution and through maybe the church in a lot of ways, saying you have to go through the priest to get to where the source is. And
The church, ironically, like so much distortion from
And
what was this beautiful mission of light, you know?
Yes. And and yet what's that? Are you okay? Are you there? Whoop, are you there?
Yeah, you just froze for a second.
Oh, okay, okay. We're back. It says my internet connection. Okay, I think I'm back though.
Okay, yeah, you're back.
What were we trying to, who's saying something to us right there?
Yeah, I know. It's funny because it's every time I talk about the distortion of the church, something happens.
Well, with that, I try to be sensitive to people who still are in a religious context, people that maybe even be listening to this, because that is their channel to something that is deeply meaningful and deeply powerful to them. And some of it, when I go into those types of spaces, it feels like a dichotomy because there's such beautiful softness in some of those services.
Yes.
Even though they're in the context of a patriarchal heritage, they still have a kindness and a softness. They take the Christ image is taken and almost delivered subconsciously, perhaps, as a soft side of the divine, and it's offered that way. So I guess what I was alluding to earlier when we talk about, I for instance, I see people when they are angry and posting things against what they didn't like over the last 4 years, but the same kind of aggro, maybe masculine, you could call it masculine energy, is coming out toward what they don't like. So it seems like it's a perpetuation of the same thing. So, maybe masculine energy is sometimes needed for revolution and needed to get beyond what was holding it down. But I often wonder, like, okay, where are we going to know how to draw the line between if we're participating in some sort of toxic behavior versus if we are creating something new? How do we create something absolutely new within this context?
Yeah. Well, I do think that there is such a thing as righteous anger. And I think a lot of folks have a righteous anger of knowing like, that's not right, right? That's a civil rights, that's a human rights issue. That's a violation of the liberty that we have as what is supposed to be a free country, right? And it's supposed to be our right as someone living in this country or just even living in the world. And it's interesting that you bring up that it's the masculine. I actually really do think it's the feminine, because like I said, the feminine principle is also like, there's so many iterations of the feminine. It's not just passive. When I talk about holding space and passivity, it's not like, oh, be a good girl and be passive. It's more so just like that there's power in passivity. But I think that there's also power in, again, it's that emotional expression. That's what I'm getting at, is that emotional expression is still very much like a feminine energy. I think then like the masculine expression or the healthy masculine expression of that would be like, okay, then what are the new laws we're going to make? What are the new, systems that we're going to put into place to fight this, right? That's sort of like, like I personally, when our last president was elected, I personally let out like a Lady Macbeth scream, like literally like from my bowels, like from like my sacral chakra. It was scary. I was enraged. This was, of course, before my healing and everything. And I was in deep in depression and anxiety back then from a shooting that had happened, which was happened because of sexist issues. So it was something that I was like deeply, really attached to at the time. But I remember just like letting out this like Lady Macbeth level howl. And that to me, like, is such a feminine thing. But I think like where it does I think where it's not helpful is when we just complain or when we just like, you know, I think having that healthy expression is good, but then like, what do we do with that, right? And again, how do you continue to live your life? How do you continue to be a leader versus putting all your eggs in the basket of this person that you've never even met in your life before, who's leading the country, right? Again, no matter what side of the aisle you're on or what country that you belong to, but just again, asking that question of how do you show up as a leader, and how do you do that for both yourself, but also, like we were talking about before, your community.
Yeah, and that seems like the road to that change or shift in ourselves requires some guidance from other people. It feels like we, like in the video, there are all of these, like you say, these sage older women that are helping this younger woman.
Yes.
It feels like, for me, I think about all the women in my life that have been very powerful in showing me things, and that's kind of part of what I think shifted the video for me, because I had a very different plot line going, and I think it would have been good too, but then this idea started coming up, and then I started thinking about all the people in my life that have been instrumental, and a lot of them happen to be women, and so when we enter this space, it feels like we can connect to guides, we can connect to people that can help us with our blind spots, or when we have weaknesses, and we enter into some sort of a relationship and openness to be willing to invite those people into our space in whatever way. That quote, "When the heart is ready, the teacher will come." Right?
Yeah.
You've heard that one probably. I think that might be from the Tao.
Yeah. And I think that I saw that so clearly in your video too, that this woman, she was ready, right? Like the main character in your video, like she was really ready for that liberation. She was ready. And like I said, I think it happens in that space where we stop pushing so hard, right? Or we stop trying to go a million miles a minute, and we pause and we go, like, is this squirming actually working? Is it actually helping? Or can I just call upon guidance? Can I call upon help? Right? Can I allow myself to be helped? And I loved that it is that older woman who helps release her, right? Because I think, like, again, going back to how we're so strongly in the masculine, that rugged individuality is really holding us back. It is this village. It is this, support system that really helps us through. Like, we're not supposed to be doing this alone, And again, I think women have been really demonized and literally persecuted and killed for wanting that and for being in those circles, right? And yeah.
Well, it's interesting though. At the end of the video, the burning. The burning. So that, how did you perceive that? What did you think was happening there as you saw that, experienced it?
I understood it as she was sort of like shedding the old identity and letting go of what no longer served her. So, allowing herself to be in this new space versus feeling like she had to hold on to that identity of even oppression, right? But I wanted to ask you about that because I felt like that was a really strong choice. And yeah, and I mean, it was beautiful. Like, the cinematography was gorgeous. Also, I just wanted to shout out your actors before I forget, because incredible, amazing. I thought they were so powerful, and just like beautifully expressed everything. But yeah, where did that idea come from, or what sort of is that theme for you that you wanted to get across?
Well, thank you. That's when I was 10 months old, I almost lost my life in a house fire. And that story just came to me as part of my heritage from my parents when they told me about what happened. And the fire department was surprised I lived. And so then I've had experiences with fire at various times of my life. I had a camper van, and my friend Clarence was driving. We were going up the Grapevine toward LA, and it caught fire.
Oh my God.
And we jumped out, and like 5 minutes later, it exploded around the firefighters. And so this fire was there. And there are a few other stories where fire has just been some sort of an element in my life, a purifier, I guess, of sorts.
Yeah.
And whenever I see the funeral pyres in India on the Ganges River, and the bodies are going up in flames, somehow it's just so evocative to me about just this maybe the ultimate transformation of where we're going to depart. But in this lifetime, fire is just some sort of purifier. It's a cleansing agent. And and when I'll tell you a funny story real quick. When I was a kid, I loved this artist called Rick Springfield. And he I don't know if you know who that is. You're younger than me, but he was a big 80s Jesse's Girl.
Yes.
And so I collected all his records, and I listened to these things, and it became like I was hypnotized by this. I worshiped this dude in a sense. And so one time I had this feeling and I was just a kid. I was probably 14, 15. And I had this feeling that this has become too much. This has become too big in my life. And I took all of those records out to, we lived in the country, and there was this big burn barrel we had. This is back when you could burn stuff whenever, and maybe that wasn't so great.
Yeah.
But I chucked those records in there and the little tapes, and I burned them. I burned my whole collection of Rick Springfield records. And it just goes back to this idea of purifying and getting rid of things that feel like they become too prominent, too obsessive, and it's a radical move. It's probably maybe not exactly a move that has grace in it, but maybe sometimes it's necessary to
I think it's totally
of something and
yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah. Again, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but that is dark divine feminine energy. Like that is the that's where we get like goddesses like Kali and Pele, and they're warm, and then they're inviting, and they're graceful, but there's also that side that is that destructive quality, but destruction for the purpose of renewal, right? And for the purpose of regeneration. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense that you have gone through those experiences in your life. And something that was being channeled through me as you were saying that it was like an initiation each of those times. Right. And we kind of say like trial by fire, right? Like you're walking through the fire. And so I think a lot of times, situations like that do happen, or we do burn away what we need to, because it is an initiation into a fuller embodiment of our true selves.
Yeah. It's not always easy to get rid of those parts of ourselves that we're not even conscious of, I think. Right. And I think that's to me where the guides can sometimes help us. In hopefully a gentle way. I've been working with a guide for a couple years, a really intelligent Jewish woman who has just helped me in ways that I don't know if I could do it all on my own.
Yeah.
It's like I felt like I really got to a point where I need some help in some way, even if it's somebody to just hold your hand as you walk through and find out your own path. They're at least there because you're shaking so much you can't walk across the wire. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that experience really well because I am one of those people. Like, you know, it's even in my human design and all over my astrology that I am here to guide. And as I was going through my own, you know, initiation this life into it all, I'm so grateful looking back, and it was all women, truthfully. I wasn't trying to make it that way, but it just was all women who ended up being these incredible guides for me, in ways that I don't even think that they fully comprehend or realize that they are, because it was just an energetic thing. Even it wasn't even that they were, you know, a business coach or anything like that, although I have had those guides as well. But it was just women who saw me for who I really am and sort of called that out and told me about that. And it's like, oh, okay, right? And sort of the idea of like holding your hand as you go across, and even, you know, if you don't have a physical guide, but calling upon your spirit guides in the same way, it's the same principle of, yeah, you're not doing this alone. Like, you're really not doing this alone. I wanted to ask you, because I noticed that all of the main characters in your video were women of color, and I wanted to know if that was a conscious decision or if that was something that just came out in casting.
The woman that takes the wafer out of the lead character's mouth, the old woman with the big hair, she wearing the white, her name was Olabisi Akande. And she is from Nigeria. She was a student of mine, and I would sit there and she'd be in class, and I'd look over at her, and I just felt like wow, everything that is residing in that woman there, thousands of years of African wisdom and power and strength and all of these things, and she's sitting there in this American classroom trying to figure out fractions and decimals and percentages and other things that we're, you know, and she had, to be honest, she had some trouble with that kind of thing. But I felt like there was something in her that I'm like, why don't you teach the class and teach us everything that you have learned through your lifetime and through the heritage that you have. So that was the connection with her. And then she brought in her friend Joy, who was the one in the blue outfit with the black cowboy hat. And because I was looking for another character, and she said, I have a friend. And when she walked up at my place, I was like, oh my God, she's so powerful. Like, you know, her very presence evokes to me just something that was amazing. And then the other couple of characters were just people I had impressions of that they needed, because of their energy and their personality, they needed to be in those places. And I can't really explain it in detail necessarily, more than it's just like, and that's the way it goes for me in a lot of the videos when I work with different people. And actually none of those people are actors.
Wow.
They are all just, they do different things. And you know, some of them have, I think a couple of them have done acting here and there, but you know, it depends on what you're doing for me. But sometimes people can bring a side to a character that a trained actor maybe wouldn't. And then there are some roles that if the actor is not trained, it's going to be a long day.
Right. Right.
Because you know, they need that training and that years of it does something. So so to answer your question, it's just sort of a feel thing. And then with the Asian woman Linda, she
loved her.
She's Chinese, and she was a graphic designer. She's an artist, and I think what she meant to me was all of the Eastern wisdom, you know, and that to me, the yin side, and that kind of wisdom of the Tao. When you read some of those teachings, it's like they operate like koans, and some of the lines in Mary's poem, you're like, I don't really know what that means, but I kind of feel what it means, and so that's what she sort of brought for me in that way, that side, the Eastern thought.
She was my favorite character in the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought all the women did, like I said, amazing jobs. I love what she said about non-actors, and I think a lot of times in that sort of more visceral, like, body language and not having lines, you can get really incredible performances out of non-actors because they're more free, you know, they don't have all like the technical stuff going. So I know what you mean about that, but yeah, I loved her. I thought she was so powerful, and I think she connected something in me personally too, with like a past life. And so that was really activating to see. Like, I don't know if you consciously were aware of this or going for this, but I think there were so many wonderful activations within your video of just remembering all these different sides of women and different kinds of women, and sort of like those strong lineages, right? And I do want to say too, because I am a white woman, that I can't speak of it from experience personally, but I have a lot of friends who work in this field who are women of color, and you know, without women of color, like, we would not be where we are today, because it really is the women of color that have held those lineages so strongly, and those indigenous women that have held those lineages so strongly. And that's why we keep saying like village and tribe and stuff in conscious language, because it's pulling upon indigenous tradition. And so one, you know, there is of course cultural appropriation in that, but two, I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much, women of color, for holding that down and for being such revolutionaries, because every single movement starts with people of color. Every single movement, every single one that we have had in terms of activism. And I did, like I said, I didn't know if it was an artistic choice to choose only women of color, or if it was, and from many different backgrounds, or if that was just something that happened organically. But that's so beautiful that happened organically.
There's one.
Yeah, I think there's one, right?
White woman, and I don't know if I did that. It just, these people moved me in whatever way. Yeah. And so I don't know if it was a conscious thing. I don't think it was.
Yeah. It was more like a divinely led thing, I think.
Yeah.
That ended up happening.
Yeah. You just open yourself up to a person. That's the way I do it. I opened myself up to this person for whatever reason. They were just moving on me. And I'm like, they need to be in this. I'm going to ask them. And they said yes. And so it went from there. And you know, there's a certain amount of like faith that goes into this. And I've been wanting to ask you about that with your work, because yesterday was my birthday. And it was the full wolf moon. I thought it was a wolf moon.
It was. Yeah.
So that was a trip that it landed on a significant birthday of mine, and it was a full moon right
That's
then.
amazing. And the sun was conjunct Jupiter too, which is really awesome.
Yeah. It was I thought a gift. But you know, this is the space that I live in, and I'm curious about the space you live in, but I take in all of this information about past lives, about the moon, about earth energy, shamanic and shamanica rituals, and all of these things. And then my Western mind, the way I've been trained, comes in, and I question it all. Yeah. And not only do I question it all, I question the science that is explaining it too. But I do factor in the science in terms of what the gift that it is to our rational mind as well. And so I guess my question is, you seem to be a strong person of faith, as I see it. You seem to be like, I'm not talking religious faith.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
I'm talking about you seem to be very confident in your beliefs about what you embody and also what you believe is the nature of reality. So, like, what does that? I don't know what do you base that on is the right way to ask the question, but what gives you the faith that you have in embodying what you believe and who you are?
Yeah, such a good question. Well, I think that I do think I'm kind of a special case. Sorry, I think I have my Facebook on and it's kind of beeping, so let me just get out of that really quickly because they're going to keep sending me messages. Okay, so speaking of divine feminine, that was one of my shamanic friends.
There were 3 charms that just hit there, 3 beautiful charms, and there's 3.
I know.
There's 3 characters in my painting, my latest painting back there.
Oh wow! Yeah,
it's all chiming in right now.
I know. I'm like, talk about divine signs. As soon as I say, well, I think I'm a little different. Yeah, I think, without getting into it too much, I just personally have had such a different journey and I think have such a different role than most people. So again, without getting into it too much, because I think that is going to be more graciously revealed over the next few years. But I think for me personally, yeah, I think faith is a huge part of it. I'm interested to know now your astrology, because in Vedic astrology, there is nakshatra, the Hasta nakshatra, that I do have actually. And in the masculine sort of expression of that, it is questioning faith versus science and everything. So I wonder if you have that too, because in the feminine expression, it's having sort of that duality, but then strongly sort of more bringing heaven down to earth and teaching that rather than questioning it. So it's interesting. But yeah, that's my moon. And so I think that really summarizes sort of, that is what I'm here to do. I'm here to serve as a high priestess of sorts, showing people that way. For me, truthfully, I mean, my dad is a man of science. My dad is a scientist, and he also is extremely tapped in intuitively. He has like really incredible clairsentience, and he, used that when he was working in the medical profession, with his not necessarily patients, but like with his colleagues and stuff. And I sort of grew up in a household where he would speak about this a lot because he is a man of science, but he would always say that the actual scientist is the one who believes nothing, right? And believes everything all at the same time, because science is not about proving right, it's about proving wrong. So science can only go so far. Science can only go as far as we as a society have evolved. However, faith and intuition can go much further, because that's something that we just naturally have in ourselves, right? And have access to in ourselves, because it's not man-made, it's us. We are the technology, right? So for me personally, I do like to look at things like, what if all of this is bullshit, right? Like just to play devil's advocate sometimes. And I think, you know what, even if it is, I don't personally believe it is, but just to throw that, into the mix, like, even if it is, I'm living a really joyful life. And I know that the only people that I know that are living truly joyful lives are ones who have some kind of belief in something bigger, right? And not just that, like, we come in, we die, that's it, right? Because even the cycles of nature show us that even if that's the truth, like, you're going to be absorbed, the nutrients from your body, right? It's going to be absorbed into the ground. That's going to help the grass grow. That's going to, feed the whatever. But so we do have this cycle naturally. So when people say, we're just here this one life and then we die and that's it, I'm like, okay, well, First of all, that's really bleak. Second of all, consciousness is so much bigger than the human body. Consciousness, I mean, nature is conscious, animals are conscious. Like it's our soul is so much bigger than this vessel that we think holds it, right? That's why the light body extends beyond the physical body, right? Or the auric field extends beyond the physical body, because the physical body is merely a catalyst for us as, you know, earthly forms to get all of that across, right? But I think it's, for me personally, you know, it has been a journey for me to fully accept who I am, because I have been like this ever since I could remember. I remember telling my preschool, or not my preschool, my Sunday school teachers, because I did grow up Episcopalian. I remember telling them, like, no, that's not true. No, that's not right. You know, they would talk about like the Holy Trinity and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, Mary Magdalene, like, you know, that's like Holy Spirit energy, and the dove, right? All of this. And I remember being at Bible camp when I was, gosh, like, my sister was really little, so probably about 8 years old, and we were enacting the Last Supper. And I remember telling my teacher, that's not how it happened. So, so I wish that I could go back to that little girl and be like, what did you mean? But I think
you just said it. You just expressed that to them. I just
expressed it. Yeah, it wasn't even that I was trying to cause drama or anything. I just very blatantly was like, that's not how it happened. Like we are enacting lies. Like this is just not what happened. And you know, of course, that was not really met with. So that wasn't. Right. Embraced by my.
You scared the hell out of those Episcopalians.
Yeah, I thankfully, again, women guides. One of my women guides was my youth minister, who she was a history major, who had recently graduated from Berkeley, and she did integrate a lot of stuff about, you know, Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, and she was the first person I ever heard who knew what I believed, which was that the creation story is a metaphor, that it's not literally said. And she was the first person who actually said that, and I felt so validated. Like finally, someone gets it. You know, but yeah, I remember, when I was 3 years old, we actually have this on video, where I'm telling my mother, it's Christmas Eve, and I'm reading from the Bible, and she goes, what's today? And I said, Jesus's birthday. And she goes, who's Jesus? And I go, my son. And she goes, you mean God's son? And I said, I am God.
Whoa. Wow.
So, yeah. So I've always been this way. And for me, it was more just, again, just with my upbringing and my conditioning and everything. You know, by the time that I was about 22, finally, like allowing myself to be this way instead of actively running away from it, because I had predicted the shooting that happened at my school. So for a while I thought that I only saw, like, you know, dark visions, or I only saw dark timelines. So it was really understanding, and I'm continuing to understand this and embody this, but my place in this world personally, and how I teach people to not just have faith, but to see the synchronicities, right? To see honestly, the proof of the faith. I mean, it's kind of indescribable what I go through daily with my clients, because people do things that they never in a million trillion years thought that they would do or thought that they would see. One girl told me that she had trouble meditating. And so we talked about it and I told her what meditation really is. And she's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense than what I'm being fed about like mindfulness and everything. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be that you have these thoughts going through your head and then you release them and you say, no, thank you. And you just pay attention to what are you subconsciously holding on to, right? Like what is your brain and what is your body so conscious or subconsciously thinking about throughout the day that's like draining your energy? And that's why we meditate. And so she was saying, I have trouble with meditation. And I was like, well, let's do a portal exercise where I take my clients through a world portal and instantly, I mean, literally instantly, she connected to source energy and she was surrounded by divine unconditional love. And this is a girl who couldn't even meditate for 2 minutes, right? And so she was really taken aback by it because she was.
Let me dig into that. Let me dig into that for a second because I'm not sure I understood you. But when you said most people enter meditation to what was the phrase you used to?
Most people enter meditation thinking that they're supposed
mindfulness. To. You said it's all this mindfulness, but you talked about mindfulness as if it wasn't necessarily the best way to enter in. So what exactly is this? It sounds like it might be a subtle difference of almost language.
Yeah. Well, mindfulness. Yeah, mindfulness. We can be mindful all day. You should be mindful all day. If you're not being mindful, that's when accidents happen. That's when, you send your boss an email that you didn't mean to send or whatever. And so for me, it's so much more like what always comes through for me is live your life as a moving prayer or live your life as a moving meditation, where it's like you can access that at any point, right? Again, this is not about an altered state of consciousness. This is about bridging, heaven, those higher dimensional frequencies to earth, right? To our third dimensional perspective. So a lot of people get down when they can't meditate properly, which is don't think of anything. And I'm like, that's not the goal. The true enlightenment is not that you're not thinking of anything. It's that you allow yourself to release all the things that you are thinking about so that you can make space for higher consciousness. Okay. And for more mindfulness, right? Throughout your day, not just in that moment, but throughout your day. So most people, when they sit down to meditate, they have like a car commercial going through their head and their to-do list and their grocery list. And I have to pick up the kids at 3 p.m., right? I'm hungry. And so it's like, that's what meditation is for you recognizing where am I limiting myself by thinking about all these little unnecessary things subconsciously, and where can I gracefully let go of those and make more space for consciousness. So as I understand what you're saying, it's more of a don't push the thoughts away aggressively, but just kind of observe them as they come to you, and then maybe release them, or it's like, think about it like a choo-choo train, like going through your head, right? And it's like, oh, pass, right? Or like clouds passing by. Versus, and like I said, I think a lot of people think that they can't meditate or that they're broken or whatever, because they're thinking about all these things and then they get frustrated and then they don't want to meditate. But like I said, what it really is it's an opportunity for you to let those things go and to recognize what are you thinking about subconsciously.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to just talk about one more thing, if that's cool.
Yes,
as we wrap up, if that's
of
okay.
Course.
Yeah, and that is the idea of success. In All the Women in Every Room, this character goes through a journey, and she, releases part of who she is, and that's kind of that story. We've been a lot of ideas about what success is are offered to us all the time. In the American culture, in particular, there seems to be a certain definition of success that has to do with material things a lot of the time. Yeah. And you work with clients, and I noticed some of the things on your site talk about, success and activating your energy to be able to create more success in your life. So what, I guess the question is, what is success to you? Yeah, I guess it's that simple.
Yeah, well, I think that success is individual for each person. And I think, honestly, how you started with the Mary Oliver poem is the perfect example of, again, integrating a new idea of success, right? Like when I talk about success, I mean that you are living your dream life, that you, like your authentic soul level, soul desire dream life, right? That you get to do the career that you want to do. You get to have enough space to eat healthy, right? And have the abundance, the financial abundance to be able to afford so. You can spend time with your kids instead of working hard all the time or in the job that you don't love. You have a really beautiful conscious connection with your partner, right? All these things. With your friends, with your family. So for me, success is really so individual, and it's going to vary by individual what their personal and soul values are, especially what they are here energetically to contribute to the collective. Some people are meant to make a lot of money and then contribute that to a cause. Some people are here to be wives and mothers, and that feels really good, right? So it really is going to be different for every single person. But for me, success is finding your authenticity and then not apologizing or letting that go, really allowing yourself the full breadth and the full expansion and embodiment of that authenticity and that worth and deservingness and divine connection, divine nature, so that you do live a life that's joyful and abundant and free.
It seems like sometimes there's some unearthing that might need to occur within each of us in order to realize what that is, because other ideas have been foisted upon us that we assume are in keeping with somebody else's dream or somebody else's idea, and it feels like it takes a long time to pull off some of that. Some of those other definitions in order to get to where our authentic place is.
Yeah, well, that's why I love working with astrology and human design as soul blueprints, because it's literally the map of your soul and your soul this life, right? And that life path and that life purpose, which, shameless plug, I do have an astrology course.
Yes. Tell us about where people can find you and where what you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really, really, really excited because speaking about personal values and success and everything, I released a lot for myself within the last year. Building a business, especially as a woman, is such an interesting process. And I think especially in this day and age where we're sort of in between paradigms, right? And we're on that bridge shifting. And so I did take on sort of these more masculine qualities, right? And again, not demonizing the masculine. It's just, for me personally, it wasn't resonant to like work super hard or, anything like that. And I did build my business pretty much in alignment there, but there were parts that I felt like I was kind of pushing and shoving that I didn't want to. So I'm really excited because I feel like the very first thing for me, and with this new embodiment that I've experienced in the last year, and just honestly, this allowing myself to be fully authentic, allowing myself to talk about these things so freely and so openly from the perspective that I have, versus feeling like it has to be justified or has to be proven to be helpful, right? Or to be transformative. This astrology course course that I have coming out is going to be all about life path and life purpose and the highest expression of your values, digging into that dark divine feminine as well, so that you can look at those shadows and, basically just your light leadership blueprint. But that's why I love working with astrology and human design, because people will break down crying on a call because they have felt their whole lives that those are the things that they value very specifically, that you can find with a moon and a second house and an eighth house and everything, right? And they just are totally taken by it and overwhelmed because they finally feel like they have that validation and that permission to be the full expression of what they actually want, rather than what their families wanted or society or a spouse or whatever. So yeah, that to me that's why I work with astrology and human design, and also the Akashic records, because I think it's important for me personally to show that full expression, right? And that individuality versus feeling like this cookie cutter consciousness or something, but really diving deep.
Yes.
So yeah.
And if somebody wants to work with you, where would they go?
Yeah, so my name is Katherine Wehler, Wehler. It's German. My name actually means pure crystal healing, which I don't think my parents knew when they named me, because it's Katherine Christine Wehler.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, after Phantom of the Opera, actually.
Oh, okay.
Christine.
Right.
Wehler in German is Waller, and it means like health or healing. So pure crystal healing. And it's Katherine Wehler everywhere. I'm the only one in the world with my name, so it's very easy to find me if you spell it right. And on Instagram.
Katherine with a K.
Katherine with a K, Katherine.
Okay.
So it's my first name _ my last name for Instagram, and my website is katherinewehler.com.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. And before we wrap this up, I was just wondering if there were any more questions that you had that we didn't get to that you think are important, or if we handled everything that we needed to handle in terms of your curiosities about the video or anything like that.
My last question that I have for you about the video was, what was sort of your mission with the video? Like, what was it that you wanted to put out into the world with the video?
When I operate in certain things, I have a very specific kind of idea. But oftentimes with this album I released, it's called Silver Bullet Suicide. And the silver bullet is what is used to kill the werewolf in werewolf mythology. So here on my birthday yesterday was the full moon, and it's a wolf moon. So I just think that's kind of an interesting synchronicity. That to me is essentially, and there's another video I'll be handling with another co-host at some point called The Sheep Are Safely Gathered In. And there are wolves throughout that whole thing. And in my very last video I released, there was a dog that looked very much like a wolf that just happened to be there with one of the actors. Anyway, the overarching idea is that wolf within. And so there are so many fingers we can point in so many directions that put the blame on others or this or that. And I feel like kind of my overarching mission is for me to take a look at myself. And through that process of art, I discover things. And the people that come into these different videos and these different projects, I just have a faith that they're there for a reason. That they're there to experience this process, and we experience this process together. And I'm sort of the director, but I'm sort of not in a certain way too, because a project becomes something else as it moves along. Yeah, it becomes something that you think you're in control of sometimes, and then you realize, well, maybe I'm really not in control. But that's sort of a convoluted way to say that I'm just moving in this way that's intuitive and that felt right. And I think it has to do with taking a look at yourself, and maybe there are some things you need to burn. Mm-hmm. And the trick is how we use strength and grace at the same time when we burn that part of us. Because I think if we're going at it hardcore, it's just going to create another illusion,
right,
that has to do with like, I'm a spiritual person now and I fucking get it, you know, and you're
like we all are.
Yeah, you know, and so like that can be sometimes just another thing that it has to be kind of like slowly sloughed off through the years. Yeah. And it feels like it's just a process of maybe a lifetime. At least that's the way it's been for me. You know, I had a birthday and I'm at a certain age, and the weird thing about it is I feel like life is actually getting better. Some people get to a certain age and they feel like, oh my God, they just have all these memories in the past. But for me, it just feels like it's at this point where it still feels like it's just getting better in certain ways. You know, I can't bench press as much as I used to, but I feel like I'm happier.
Yeah, but again, and that goes back to like that idea of success and values, right?
Yes,
it's
yes.
like what we think is going to bring us success or what we think is going to bring us happiness is actually what is holding us back, right? Versus that true joy, right? That unshakable joy that we find.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Very cool. Well, I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. I'm a big fan of like Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits and stuff. And I felt like it had those sort of resonances to it. So I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. And I, again, just want to shout out your actors because just amazing performances, especially that they're non-actors. Right. Yeah. Even more impressive.
It was a pleasure to be in that space, and I want to shout out to Dylan Wright, who was a cinematographer too. He did an amazing job, and I did some of the cinematography. He did most of it, and it was a pleasure to work with him. I feel lucky to have worked with a lot of cinematographers that just were easy to work with, and I feel like that, you know, that's kind of a gift too. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, it came together beautifully, and Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to do this, to invest in it, and for bringing your perspective to it. That was essential. I feel like it was essential to hear your perspective on this, and so there's probably a reason that we're having this conversation. And thank you.
Yeah, I feel like it was really divinely guided, especially I was going to say about the wolf, even that's a matriarchal society. Wolves are matriarchal pack animals. And I think that even is really, really cool that, you know, that we would be meeting the day after this wolf moon and this Leo moon, right? And with fire and everything, it just is so symbolic and beautiful. So thank you, universe. Beautiful how it all comes together.
Yeah. And thank you, Katherine.
Thanks.
I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Ciao.